Hello and welcome to the Carbon Flow podcast, brought to you by VQuest. My name is Barry Lynch, co-founder of VQuest, an intuitive, design-integrated carbon management tool for architects, engineers and contractors. We are busy right now recording and editing a series of podcasts, which we will be releasing monthly starting this October. Carbon Flow will be meeting professionals, suppliers and government representatives to talk about everything and anything carbon and carbon reduction related within the construction and construction design industry. We'll be talking about industry, the groundbreaking projects, the available technology, the materials and the methodologies that we will all use to help us meet our climate targets. If you didn't already know, our industry is responsible for around 24% of global carbon emissions. We believe it needs to be talked about more. We need to discuss it, debate it, and spread real-life stories of how people have actually achieved carbon reductions already. We have some cool podcasts already lined up, including Bernie O'Fagan from RM Designs and Julian Addington from Engco, speaking about the amazing low-carbon commercial projects that they are designing and building on the west coast of New Zealand. We also have Katie Simmons, Principal Engineer Advisor at MBIE, within their Building for Climate Change team. Katie will be talking to us about upcoming announcements from the Building Minister about climate change programme here in New Zealand. You can also follow VQuest on LinkedIn to stay up to date with what's happening with us. So we will be speaking with Bob Burnett and Jasmin McNelly of Bob Burnett Architecture. Bob and Jasmin are going to be talking about their experience with the New Zealand Building Standard and their experience in trying to design and build the first carbon negative home in Christchurch, New Zealand. Sponsors of today's podcast are Lean Canvas, a cool co-working space designed specifically for Christchurch startups and sustainability communities. You can find out more about Lean Canvas at www.leancanvas.org.nz. Well, welcome to the first Carbon Flow podcast. I'm Barry, and we're here at the Dark Matter Studios at Lean Canvas in Christchurch, New Zealand, and I'm about to talk to Bob Burnett and Jasmin McNelly, who are from Bob Burnett Architecture, who are leaders and innovators within the carbon ecosphere and Superhome Movement and high performance housing. I will have you guys introduce yourselves one at a time and just tell us a little bit about you, how you got into architecture, how you ended up, I guess, in high performance, low carbon construction, and I guess how you know each other, and yeah, just go from there. So Bob, do you want to start?
Cool, thanks Barry, thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I guess we've always been into sustainable architecture right from the get-go, and for over 2 decades we've been kind of early adopters and trying to sort of lead the way, and it's just part of our values and what we believe in. Mainly residential homes is the space that we play in. Current project, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about soon, is the New Zealand's first carbon negative superhome or zero carbon superhome.
It's really cool. We'll come back to that in a minute, but I'm keen to know a little bit more, I guess, about how you became an architect in the first place, Bob.
Yeah, well, I was kind of always interested in doing something creative and that sort of artistic side, and I was kind of quite good at maths too, so it sort of aligned to take up architecture.
I've no artistic side whatsoever, but I am good at maths, so I obviously ended up as a quantity surveyor for 20 odd years.
Cool, yeah. So, you know, I started out, in my past life, I started out working for some very large architecture firms on entirely commercial work, and I really only got into residential work after starting my own practice and meeting my wife, who's also my business partner, Shizuka Yasui, an architect from Japan. And
so was it in Japan you were working, or was it across Europe, or was it here in New Zealand?
In New Zealand, yeah.
Cool.
But I've just kind of learned a lot from visiting Japan and seeing what they've done, what they do over there. And
you took some inspiration from
a bit like a kid in the candy store.
Like from the Japanese architecture, from a perspective of performance, are they good performers? Are they, compared to New Zealand?
I think everywhere's better than New Zealand. We're kind of dragging our feet big time, but I think they're very advanced in terms of, probably not so much as Europe in terms of like the thermal performance and sustainability, but definitely in terms of their earthquake resilience and those sort of things, miles ahead of where we are. So there's quite a bit to learn there, but you know, I've sort of absorbed all the kind of design and stuff when I've been visiting Japan, but so that's been great.
Yep.
And you know, just learning from Europe and other places too. I guess the good thing in New Zealand is, I mean, it's a bad thing that we're behind, but the good thing is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just can copy what people have done overseas, which is better.
Yeah, which is typically what Australia and New Zealand does anyway. They tend to look at what Europe is doing and start, you know, bringing some of those standards over and applying them where they work, obviously. Yeah. Well, how did you, I guess, how did the sustainability side of things start? Did you, like, was that something from day one? Like, came straight out of architecture school and started looking in, or practicing within the sustainability?
Yeah, I think I've just got green blood. I think it's just been part of my values and my ethos from the beginning. You know, I grew up in a rural environment on an orchard, and you know, and working on the land, and you know, I guess my dad was an environmentalist, and you know, it's just part of what I've always thought about. You know, we've never designed anything to building code. It's always like, we've got to do better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, any step forward is a good thing, right? You know, anything above that building standard. You often hear people say, you know, the standard is the minimum you need to meet. Whereas so many people have the perspective of it's the way you build. But it should be just the minimum. I
think that's a big problem in New Zealand. You know, people look at it as the ceiling, but it should be the floor. You know, it should be the starting point.
Yeah, some crazy decisions are made around just, you know, where to spend your money in a house. So Jasmin, do you want to tell us a little bit, I guess, about you and where you came from, how you got into architecture?
Yep, sure. I mean, similar to Bob, I was very good at maths at school, and my favourite subject was graphics, and it kind of just naturally led into studying architecture. I'd been in the industry for a few years before I started working for Bob, but prior to that, I was not aware that our building code was so substandard. I actually completed my own first home 3 months after I started working for Bob. And by the time it was completed, I was like, what have I done? And unfortunately, it's been basically the last 8 years of watching all those things that I did not want to happen come true, with like moisture on my windows. Really unhealthy indoor living environment. My house was cold, you know, and it's brand new, double glazed. I thought it had all the things that it should have, and it's just been, been heartbreaking.
Too cold or too hot?
Too cold or too hot, yes. I have both of those problems. So I'm kind of on my own personal mission to improve the house that I live in. So I've become quite passionate in my time with Bob about preventing other people from making the same mistakes and being led up the garden path.
That's awesome. So the both of you are involved in the Superhome Movement, right? Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that Superhome Movement, what it is and why it exists?
Yeah, so I was one of the founders of the Superhome Movement back in 2015, and that really came about. We did 2 homes that were the first 10-star Homestar rated homes in New Zealand, and one of them we kept as our show home and office, and that was really the first super home. And we thought, well, that's great, you know, that got a lot of press, and it was on TV several times, and we thought, well, we really need to get the message out there that it is not too difficult to do something that's better. It's affordable, and everybody should be doing it. And so we started the Superhome Movement, and we thought, well, you know, there's a lot of groups that are in the industry, mainly talking to the industry, not talking to the homeowners. So our focus was on creating awareness for the homeowners and the community, rather than educating the professionals, or as well as educating the professionals.
It's kind of, there's an odd scenario there at play where you, I guess, who you're selling to and who's the user.
Yeah, well, I guess the person who's going to own the home and live in the home is that, you know, they're the person that pays for it. So they have the power to make the right decisions. and they have the ability to say to their architect or their builder, no, I don't want that, I want better.
That's awesome. So effectively you're giving them enough knowledge that they can see where the building standard is, but then see what they can do with their budget to make it a little bit better in increments until effectively you get to a very high performance house.
Yeah, and I think, I think the stumbling block is a lot of people just think, hey, it's just ridiculously expensive to build in the first place. So obviously they think, or wrongly they think, to do something better is going to be too expensive.
Yep.
But a lot of the things that we do, or a lot of things are more expensive, but quite a number aren't. So it's just kind of a no-brainer if you can do something that saves money or is cost neutral, which is going to provide better performance and a better, healthier living environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and obviously you don't end up with the condensation on the windows, and you don't end up with overheating in summer and too cold in winter. So it's amazing, how poor performing the actual houses here in New Zealand are, and how low that standard is actually set.
Yeah, well, I think Kiwis just put up with stuff that perhaps other parts of the planet people wouldn't put up with. I
can remember when I first arrived over here and I was looking at rental homes just after the earthquakes in 2012, and I remember looking at all the individual houses and there's thinking, obviously because these are for rent, they must be lower standard than what people are actually building. You start going in, you start living in these houses, and you start talking to other Kiwis and kind of going, oh, the house is really drafty, or it's it's not that old. It was probably built, the very first house I was in was built probably 2001, 2002, so it was only at the time 12 years old.
I think the problem is people, they just think it's normal. They think condensation on the windows is normal.
Yeah.
And they think being cold in your house is normal. But, a lot of our clients are people with accents, people from overseas, and people that have experienced better houses and come here and are horrified, or they've heard about how poor our building standards are, and they just want better than that.
Yep. I remember when I was in high school, I used to study construction studies within high school, and we used to have to draw using set square and all of that, just details and cross sections. And I remember one of the things that stuck with me was cold bridging. At the time it was called cold bridging, we called it thermal bridging. And I remember that was 1994, 95 when we were learning that, and we were being told that basically you never cold bridge. Nothing, you avoid it at all costs. It has to be designed out. It was one of the key things we were taught. You would think to a high school student to be taught about that, and yet coming over here, it's still fairly standard practice.
Yeah, I think the Kiwi attitude kind of, the this is the way we've always done it, the she'll be right mate sort of mentality, and we don't know what we don't know a lot of the time, or we think we know about building, and everybody's got two jobs. One is their day job and the other is they're an architect, so they think they want to design their own house. But they might think, okay, we'll put some more insulation in, but they haven't thought about thermal bridging, or they haven't thought about air tightness. And it's like, if you miss one thing out, there's still a hole in the bucket.
You've got there's one part of your building performing fairly low, and that's it's not going to fix things, is it? That's it's awesome to hear about the Superhome movement. I guess, does that Superhome movement concentrate specifically on operational, or does it also look at the materials that are actually used within the building?
It's very holistic, so we're thinking about not just energy efficiency and the operational carbon, we're thinking about the materials, using responsibly sourced materials and low toxic materials, and materials with low embodied carbon. Natural recyclable materials are our preference if that's possible.
Awesome. So you guys are working on a really interesting project at the moment, one of your own projects. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What is it? It's down in Barrington, Summerfield area here in Christchurch.
Yeah, it's kind of really Beckenham, near the Colombo Street, Summerfield Street corner. There's a little sort of shopping hub there, so it's a cool location. And we're doing 4 townhouses, one of which we're going to keep as a demonstration project, which will also be our office for Superhome Movement and Bob Burnett Architecture. So we're looking forward to seeing that built, and sort of a new chapter there.
So that demo house, what's Mike? Is it any different from the rest of the houses there, or are they all similar kind of standard?
They're all very similar. Yeah, they have a lot of similarities across the board. I think the biggest difference is that House A, the one that we're keeping for our office, is that has a suspended floor, and that's specifically just to eliminate as much carbon from the build as possible. That's probably the most notable difference.
Sure.
Otherwise, they're all similar.
So they're all relatively low carbon construction, or
yes,
okay, so they're all really high performance, low carbon construction.
Yeah,
correct.
Really cool. There won't be many projects like that in New Zealand.
Yeah,
No.
so I think I'm not sure we're the first zero carbon home, but we're the first zero carbon super home.
Yep.
And then no carbon for the House A, B, C, and D, low carbon. But time will tell. We'll model all of them. We've just focused on the one house so far, but
well, I guess make sure that it's achievable first, and that it actually works.
And see how it's achievable as well. Like setting out on this journey, it was like we set a big target for ourselves to be carbon negative, carbon zero. And it's been a big learning journey for us. But it was also really cool to see that a lot of the things that we were already doing are actually ticking all the boxes, and we're on the right track.
What you were saying, that sustainability has always been something that's key to the way you design. So now it's just proving, I guess, the proof is in the pudding that you have been building that way all along. And just seeing the areas that could possibly be a little bit improved if you are trying to get to that net zero kind of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, like Jasmin said, it's a steep learning curve, but we love, that's what gets us out of bed in the morning. We love innovating, learning something new, each project we do. And but it's just really quite encouraging, quite gratifying to see a lot of the things we've been doing, we're doing the right things. And so it's been great working with you and VQuest, and actually seeing putting the numbers on it and seeing how that works. I think there's been a lot of talk about embodied carbon in recent years, and it's probably only in the last few years people have started thinking about and talking about it. It's all been about sort of energy efficiency and the operational side of things up until then. But
which operational has probably been the larger end and the easier to tackle. The embodied carbon means that we're fundamentally changing some of the materials in our buildings, so it feels like a harder challenge,
Definitely.
But at some point it's going to swing, and there's going to be more opportunity within the embodied carbon than there is in the operational carbon, because we'll have gotten fairly efficient at the operational carbon.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting to be just sort of where the rubber meets the road and doing it. Rather than talking about it, for years, and recently we've seen lots of webinars about why we need to be doing better, and not so much about how. All the talk about calculating carbon, but not about the real tangible things that you need to do on the ground to actually achieve lower carbon.
What are those materials? We put questions out there, give us low carbon materials, give us your options, and then the feedback that we got, there weren't that many things out there, or people didn't know about them. So it's just getting the conversations of what are those materials, how do we do it?
Scratching the surface.
I feel like
I guess there's going to be materials out there that we kind of already touched on that would already be either storing carbon or relatively low carbon. But obviously you are hitting problems with other materials then that are high carbon emitters, and you're trying to find alternatives to those. Any examples of those that how you solved it, or
just reducing the amount of steel that we use in builds, and sometimes the amount of concrete. Although there's this sort of lower carbon concrete's becoming a thing now too. And you're always going to need concrete. It's just being intelligent about how you use it. But we find we can eliminate a lot of steel just by having the right engineering solutions and working with savvy engineers that are open to that.
It's finding the compromise between budget and reducing your carbon, and there's plenty of opportunities in there to actually optimize your design and find that happy medium.
Definitely.
Like right now we're not working to any thresholds, so any foot forward is a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So did you come across any innovative materials within that design process? Anything new to the market that was kind of interesting to you guys?
There's definitely been several products that it was kind of like we didn't know about them.
I think the cladding that we use is quite cool. I think that that's recyclable, it's natural material, so there's no sort of toxic chemicals in it. So you can just, it's a wooden cladding, so we can just take the offcuts and chip it up and put it on the garden. So
and you don't have to put a finish on it as well. You can leave it uncoated, and it's not often you get a timber material that you can leave it uncoated, which was pretty exciting in itself.
The WeatherTex cladding. We've used some ProLam timber portals instead of steel portals, which is great too. Just the laminated timber.
Save board is another cool material.
Making
really cool
linings out of waste.
It's a really cool innovative material just out of New Zealand.
Tetra Paks,
so that's been really cool.
Even our flooring selections and stuff like that. So just looking at, obviously carpet's typically quite, that's very carbon intensive. So just looking at what other flooring alternatives are out there. So your timber flooring's good, but then, there's cork. And when I think cork, I think back to the 70s. But there's so many lovely cork options now, and it's quite cool. And Mammalium, another great product that we came across.
So I mean, sometimes you come across a material which sadly you can't use because we don't have the information about the carbon, and it doesn't have an EPD, Environmental Product Declaration. So
it's not ideal. Actually, recently we were hearing that across in the UK, the process that they have is very similar to here, that if you can't get an EPD for a product but you want to use it, and you still want to fill out the carbon LCA compliance reporting, that you use an alternative material that's similar to it. But they're now bringing in some rules around that. So they're basically saying if you use a substitute EPD, they're adding a 25% premium on the carbon to it. So it's going to push suppliers who don't have
that's
EPD
really cool
to go and do it, because they're now being negatively impacted by having a 25%
that's cool
emission on top. So I think it's going to speed it up. We're also seeing kind of across in the US and the UK into Europe that a lot of that EPD development is starting to be subsidised. So by local governments and by the governments in each of those countries, and I think
that's a good idea.
Needs something like that, because again, it speeds it up considerably.
Inspires people to get on board and get it done.
So in the future, we're going to be competing. These materials are going to be competing not just on the cost, but on the carbon performance as well. So they got to actually start being more efficient at what they're doing and reporting how they're performing.
I think a big sort of part of the ethos of Superhome Movement is identifying where the low-hanging fruit is and things that are easy, So if we can sort of do the hard yards and go through the pain of learning about it, and then just tell people, hey, you can use this XYZ material. It's been sort of the same with the energy efficiency. Just use this detail, and just take people direct to where the easy wins are, rather than get too sort of stuck in the weeds and get too complicated.
And that is often the problem. You see a lot of people who have an interest in something like really high performance homes or even passive homes, and then they get stuck into it and realise that this is going to be too expensive or too hard. And it's finding that balance, because for hundreds of years, thousands of years, we've used all sorts of combination of materials to build houses. So trying to find something that's optimized for your budget is still possible without having to go all the way up to, we say, a high performance passive home type construction. You can find what fits within your budget that's above the standard.
Absolutely. Everybody's on a budget, and it's great to aim for the best if you can afford it, but not everybody can afford that.
And about also what can you do right now that you can add to as well, like just realising for all homeowners to realise that they don't have to do all of it to start with. So it's like get the thermal envelope right, and then you can add solar panels, you can add rainwater collection. So it's about what you can do right now. And I think also about people prioritising, like what are their priorities for their build, like what do they actually want to spend their money on, what's actually important. So just kind of getting those priorities.
It definitely comes back to just sort of awareness and understanding the benefits of doing things differently, Otherwise, if people don't understand that, then, they'll just spend the money on the bling and the things they can see.
Because it's not something that's prevalent here in New Zealand, or I haven't seen much of, but you do see it in other countries across Europe. You definitely saw it in Ireland. You used to see it, and that was the keeping up with the Joneses. So you're looking at their house and going, we have to one up them. You know what I mean? But it was never one up in performance. It was one up with you know, a cladding system or a sculpture outside the door, or you know,
Yeah.
it was never you know the high performance. You know, so it's kind of cool to see you guys are starting to see a shift, I guess, in people that are coming to you. They want the performance to be the bling, you know.
Yeah, I guess we've always been in a bubble, and because we've got a reputation for doing what we do, you know. And but but for the mainstream industry, it's a real when you start having the right conversations with people and people understand it, it's a real game changer. And opening people's eyes to the fact that there's different ways of doing things, and you know, like you say, having money, they're keeping up with the Joneses things, doing a big flash house. It's not necessarily going to be, or quite often isn't, a high-performing home. It's just big and shiny, you know, and it looks good in photos, but it could be shocking in terms of its performance. And
condensation on the windows.
Or overheating.
You've got more windows to clean. You've got a bigger house to try and keep cool. You know.
So it's not all about having more money, and you know, probably one of the best things you can think about is just, if you're on a tight budget, when most people are, is just be more efficient in terms of the planning and the size. You know, so create something that's nice, but maybe a few square meters less, so you can put more into the quality and
a couple of meters less on your external deck, and maybe a bulked up insulation instead. You know?
Yeah, and there's a lot of tricks with the design where you can just, you know, have the right proportions and the right size openings, and you know, maybe a slightly higher ceiling height and things, and that just makes it more spacious, appear more spacious than the footprint would otherwise make you think.
Yeah, and getting the things like the orientation right, so you're getting the right solar gains during the winter months, but also that you're not going to cook through the summer when the sun is just coming around on the west.
All of these things we're talking about is just good design, and I think the sad thing in New Zealand homes or buildings in general is, probably homes more so, the design is just marginalised. So people tend to sort of almost skip that part and go straight to the builder, and they don't understand design and what it can do for them. And,
so we're, I guess, here in New Zealand, obviously we were expecting some carbon legislation in 2024. It's looking like it might be a little bit longer for us now. We've got a new government in, and things have slowed down a little bit on that kind of carbon legislation perspective. And you guys are pioneers, you're going ahead and doing it anyway. You're measuring that carbon, you're actually actively going beyond measuring it, which was what was proposed by the legislation initially. You're going beyond measuring it, you're actually now moving into the actual management of it as well. The likes of selecting a suspended timber floor instead of a concrete floor, you know. So it's great that measurement is that first part of the legislation, but ultimately we need the management side of things as well, the actual active reduction. So it's really cool that you guys have moved into it, actively doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of logical, you know. For all of my career, I've basically ignored the building code, you know. Well, not ignored it, but in terms of the performance standards, because it's just not fit for purpose. And you know, I describe the building code as the worst possible house that you're legally allowed to build. So why would you want to do that? And obviously the quickest, biggest changes will happen when legislation comes in, but we can't wait for that. We just got to do things for ourselves.
It's great that you guys are pushing on with it. Are you using tools at the moment? And I know I'm asking, being a bit glib on that, and that we know that you guys are using the VCross tool, which is our own tool. But did you guys, I guess, were you looking for a tool before you found VQuest? Did you use anything else?
So we've both been Homestar assessors, so we looked at Green Building Council's, Jasmin did, so maybe you could.
We looked at using their HEC tool, and I just found very early on that they didn't have the specific build-ups that I was looking for, so I was never going to get a true representation of the high-performance homes that we do. There are a lot of more standard construction typologies in there that would mean the results that we were showing were not a true representation of what we're doing. So then I looked at, well, let's do LCA quick. And unfortunately, in terms of workflow, that wasn't very quick. Me trying to learn something new from the start. As well as do the documentation for the project as well, alongside my colleague Freddie. It was becoming a bit much, and we weren't kind of getting on the right path. And then we came across VQuest, it's it's been amazing. It simplified things incrementally, like, I can't even say how much. I was able to visualize the project as I would in ArchiCAD and just be applying the materials to that and getting the results straight away. So it was an absolute game changer starting to work with you guys.
I guess, like, I'm not here obviously to plug VQuest, and what I'm trying to guess is understand that you guys had a pain point, and that effectively you found a solution to that. It's a work in progress, obviously, things are continually improving. The LCA Quick tool, which is obviously going to be, or is being proposed as the compliance reporting tool in New Zealand here when we do get legislation that backs that up and a building standard change. It's an incredible tool. I mean, we taught ourselves how to use it as well, and it's I've never seen anything as detailed as it anywhere in the world, and we've done a lot of research to see what tools are out there, but it's just it's overwhelming when you look at it, because there's a lot going on. There's it's Excel based, there's a huge amount going on, so it's that in itself that's a pain point. It's a fantastic tool, but you probably can't use it until you get to the later stages of design, and then you have the issue of quantifying all of the materials, and then making sure those quantification of the materials and all the materials get loaded in so that you do get an accurate LCA or carbon life cycle analysis. So it's I think we're hearing a lot that is the pain point for everybody who opens it up, is that it's overwhelming to begin with, and then it just takes too long to actually enter all the information.
I think we've got the sort of added layer of, because New Zealand is a couple of decades behind, the industry hasn't even really properly dealt with energy efficiency, and so we've yet to. They're still grappling with that. We have, but we're not normal, but doubly overwhelming, because we still haven't got that under our belt. We're still, whereas the rest of the world has. So, in comes this another layer of complexity with the operational, with the embodied carbon, and we haven't even dealt with operational. So it's a double whammy, and I can see how the industry can be overwhelmed.
We speak to a lot of architects and engineers out there that are trying to grapple with that. Not just they already see, I guess, compliance as being a burden. That there's a substantial amount of compliance required in New Zealand. A lot of paperwork to do and a lot of standards that need to be met. And it's not often easy. So this new carbon legislation, I think a lot of people are fairly worn out and tired from compliance already. So topping this on top of it is kind of, I think, you're right, overwhelming. I think, and when we speak to the architects, I think that, and engineers, that comes across, So I'm again not trying to plug the tool that we're working on, but just we're trying to resolve that. You know what I mean, by making it a little bit easier.
I think it's a great tool. You should just plug it. Just be shameless.
It makes it a lot easier, and the fact that it can actually communicate with LCA quick, so we're still able to use that compliance pathway in the future. It's the middleman that we now don't need to be, and we can look to somebody else and focus on the areas that we are supposed to specialise in, which is that design and the documentation. And then in the same way that we involve a structural engineer, we're able to put it out to somebody who specialises in the carbon space. So it's completely invaluable.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess carbon reduction is coming into the industry. I know that sounds, we've just talked about it being overwhelming and a problem. We know sustainability is a key thing, but do you see any other offshoots, I guess, of carbon reduction that might impact us? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it going to take you more? Is it going to take builders more time on site? Is it going to take them less time on site? Any insights into?
I think initially, when you do something new for the first time, it's always going to be there's going to be an overhead in that. But then the second time you do it, it's like, well, that was easy. Why were we so apprehensive? And I think the first thing is understanding why we need to do it, and then obviously calculation is essential to know how good or bad we're doing. But just the awareness, having a conversation, and just thinking about the future and our kids and their kids, and why wouldn't you want to be reducing the carbon? And the building industry is such a dirty industry. There's such an opportunity to do much better. So it's just about discussing those values and what sort of legacy do you want to leave for the next generation.
I think it's kind of important to keep that in mind, that the reason we're doing all of this is because we're dealing with a climate change disaster. You know, it's like we've seen the flooding down in Dunedin last week. The US has a second hurricane now hitting its direction that is again going to break the record of one that only hit 2 weeks ago. You know, I think they're having over in Asia. There's more hurricanes and flooding going on there. Where I'm from, back in Ireland in Cork, that flooded last week. You know, so it's becoming a bigger issue that we have no choice but to tackle it. You know, and it's almost one of the human fallacies to not look too far into the future. You know, we have to. You know, because it's for the kids. It's for it's for the next generation that we have got to do it.
Yeah. Human beings can be strange animals sometimes. You know.
Very short-sighted.
We don't consider our own death. That's the thing. You know?
But I think that whole sort of attitude of short-termism and just being selfish and just thinking about the here and now and not thinking about the future. It's something that we just got to get over, you know, and you know, just thinking about anything and everything you can do right now, and just thinking about not overthinking it, but just thinking about all of the little things that you can do that'll weigh it up, and pointing out, creating the awareness, pointing out the materials that are the right materials right now, and the right methods of building.
Again, it goes back to that optimized design, just finding the right material in the right place that it performs both to your budget and to actually reducing carbon. You know? So we do have, I don't know, a stick coming eventually. You know, we're seeing it right across the world. 198 countries have signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement, and a lot of them have already started moving. You know, so there's a number of states are in the US, including California. You go up into Canada, into Vancouver. They last week set their thresholds, or last month set thresholds. California is measuring carbon right now. New York State is measuring carbon, and then you go across into the likes of France, are probably one of the most advanced. You know, they've already got thresholds. You go into the Scandinavian countries; they've been measuring for years. You know, so they're all way ahead. They're all moving. You know, so I think there's a fundamental change coming, and that's a big stick for New Zealand as opposed to a carrot. You know, so we've got time to get ready with it because we don't have that legislation, but that stick is coming.
Yeah. And you know, I think a lot of people just don't realise there's so many things that we could be doing now, and so many things we could be doing better. You know, just minimising waste is a big one. A lot of the waste that is created out of the construction sector is just totally unnecessary.
I think like we spoke earlier on about EPDs, the environmental product declarations that the producers our suppliers are now producing. You know? I think a lot of those guys that are getting their EPD together are actually starting to investigate their internal processes. You know, so how they actually manufacture their materials, where their energy comes from in doing it, what their packaging looks like, reusing that packaging, collecting the waste afterwards. I think I saw a post on LinkedIn yesterday about Terra Lana, who are a wool insulation company here in New Zealand, educating people on site that please don't put our wool our wool insulation in the skips. We come and collect it for free. You know, and it helps everybody because that's not going to a landfill. It's going back to the factory. It's going to go back into production again and go back out and be used on another site. You know, so it's a lot of it is education.
There's more of a holistic approach coming in to a lot of materials. And I think it's going to become more commonplace.
And it needs to be, you know, instead of them being the innovators and that being an outlier, that just needs to become common practice.
Sooner the better. Okay. Right, that's pretty much it, guys. We'll wrap it up with that. Thanks for coming in today, and a shout out again to Dark Matter Studio, who have given us the studio today to shoot this podcast. And cheers, Kaushik.
Thanks very much.